All right, that brings us to our welterweight main event now, as champion Islam Makhachev comes in at minus 335. He takes on challenger Ian Machado Garry, who comes in at plus 270. Now, 16 straight wins for Makhachev has now gotten closer and closer to being ranked as one of the best fighters of all time. The issue that I have, and I might go on a little bit of a rant here, and I'm going to try to keep it short, is the fact that he's going out there and fighting guys that we don't really care to see him fight anymore, right? Sure, the first Volkanovski fight, everybody wanted to see it, and Volkanovski made it a really close fight. Then Makhachev was scheduled to rematch Charles Oliveira, which is a fight that really didn't make sense at the time. But luckily, Oliveira gets injured. Volkanovski steps in once again. Makhachev makes short work of him. Then Dustin Poirier gets to fight for the title. Why is Poirier fighting for the title? Regardless, Makhachev goes out there, submits him in the 5th round. Then we're finally about to get the fight that everybody wanted. We were about to get Arman Tsarukyan versus Islam Makhachev 2, a rematch years and years in the making. Tsarukyan got much better than he had been in their first fight. Makhachev obviously got much better since the first fight as well. But Tsarukyan sprains his back on weigh-in day and is forced out of the fight, and in steps Renato Moicano on short notice, and he gets worked almost immediately. So I'm not really blaming Makhachev there. He was scheduled to fight a guy that everybody wanted him to see him fight, but it was the other guy that fucked it up. Then he decides to leave lightweight. He's like, you know what? You know what would solidify me as one of the best fighters in the world is to go out there and win a title in a different division. But luckily for him, the guy that's holding the title is the perfect stylistic matchup for him in Jack Della Maddalena. So Makhachev goes out there and absolutely squashes him and wins the title, wins the welterweight fight title, and starts claiming himself the pound-for-pound best fighter in the UFC. The hardcore fans know it doesn't matter if you win the title. It depends on who you beat going up to the title, and who you beat for the title, and who you beat trying to defend the title. Look at those last 3 wins for Makhachev. Is that pound-for-pound worthy? Is that a pound-for-pound worthy resume? No, especially stylistically speaking. We know Poirier has always struggled against grapplers. Moicano, okay, I'm willing to give Makhachev the benefit of the doubt there, considering he was scheduled to fight Tsarukyan. But Jack Della Maddalena, we knew how that fight was going to go. Even this weekend, the one fighter at welterweight I would love to see Makhachev fight, and I think had made a good enough case for himself to make the fight, is Michael Morales, a guy with a little bit of a wrestling background, but still the size and the knockout threat to actually cause Makhachev some issues. Now, I don't want to completely talk down on Garry. I'll obviously touch on Garry when I get to his background, but I feel like Morales should have been the fighter going up against Makhachev here instead of Ian Machado Garry. But regardless, let's get back to Makhachev, one of the best grapplers in the UFC in all time. Very good chain wrestling, very good submission game as well. His striking has obviously gotten up there. The way that he knocked out Volkanovski was very impressive. He's getting more and more comfortable there. But it's really all about the wrestling, chain wrestling, taking opponents down, smothering them, trying to find that arm triangle choke, trying to submit them, trying to get them out of there. Submitting Charles Oliveira is no easy feat, and Makhachev did it with relative ease. So we got to give him credit for that. I just want to see him fight the fighters we all want to see him fight. We want to see him fight Tsarukyan. We want to see him now fight Michael Morales. We wanted to see him fight Ilia Topuria. We might get the Morales fight. We're definitely not going to get the Tsarukyan or Topuria fights though. Now this weekend, he's going to be looking to keep this undefeated streak going as he goes up against Ian Machado Garry, who was a very solid prospect coming into the UFC, right? A lot of people mainly knew him as a striker because of the way he was picking opponents apart up until the point that he fought Michael Venom Page. Once he fought Page, then we saw him dig into his grappling bag, which if you are a fan of regional MMA and watch Garry in his Cage Warriors days, you know that he has grappling, and that's why I backed him very heavily against Michael Page. Now it started to look a little bit shaky in the 3rd round as he started to slow down, but he still did enough to still win that fight on the scorecards. Then he went up against Shavkat Rakhmonov, I believe in December of 2023. Was it 2023 or 2024? December of 2024, struggled in that fight, right? Rakhmonov, very dangerous fighter, very aggressive, a lot of threatening power as well. And Garry struggled big time in that fight and ended up losing a decision. But he pushed Rakhmonov more than any fighter had pushed Rakhmonov up into that point. Then he takes a short notice main event slot against Carlos Praches, where he pulls out the same game plan that he had against Michael Page, winning the first 3 rounds and holding on long enough through the last 2 rounds to win that fight on the scorecards. And then he goes out there and outboxes and outworks Belal Muhammad on the feet, beating him over the course of 3 rounds to put himself in this position to fight for the title. Now, Garry is very well-rounded, right? He was a guy that started off training, obviously, in his native of Ireland. He moved down to Killcliff FC to try to get some rounds there, rub some people the wrong way, and then he moved to Brazil to train at the same camp as Charles Oliveira, and has seemed to have built a good enough relationship with those guys where he's been there for several years now. Solid striker, good timing, good distance management, great game planning and ability to execute game plans, very, very impressive. And his wrestling and grappling is actually not that bad either. So he brings some very, tough things and a puzzle for Makhachev to try to figure out here. So he's not a bad challenger by any means, but I feel like, that loss to Rakhmonov probably should have put him down a couple pegs compared to other guys that I believe are more deserving of this shot. Now, the way these guys match up, right? The question really is, how does Garry decide to approach this matchup? What kind of game plan is he going to try to bring in to try to deter Makhachev? Because we know what Makhachev is going to do, right? He's going to go out there. He's going to try to get the takedown. He's going to try to smother Garry, maybe even try to find a submission. So does Garry just try to go scramble for scramble with Makhachev early here, try to put on a high enough pace to maybe reap the fruits of his labor in the latter rounds where, we know Makhachev is going to expend a lot of energy trying to keep Garry to the ground. And if Garry just tries to manage his gas tank well enough that he could probably be better in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, technically speaking, he is the better striker, so he could definitely take advantage of Makhachev there. And his grappling is potentially good enough that he can make Makhachev work very hard in the latter half of this fight. I know people are going to be like, hey, Garry has a bad gas tank. Look what happened to him against Michael Page. Look what happened to him against Carlos Prates in fights that he ended up winning. But one thing you guys have to remember is grappling offensively takes a lot more energy from a fighter than having to defend it, especially if you're kind of just willing to accept it, which I think Garry won't mind in the first maybe couple rounds here. We saw the perfect example of it just this past weekend or 2 weekends ago for the PFL. I picked Maxwell Jantu Nana to finish Eduardo Neves in the 3rd round, and I had a few people call me out and be like, hey, how could you pick Nana to win in the 3rd round when his gas tank looked like absolute shit against Justin Clark and he got finished in the 3rd round? It's all based on the style. It's all based on how a fighter is going to fight the other one. I believe Nana felt that he'd be able to knock out Justin Clark in the 1st round, and when he realized that Clark was eating all of his big shots, he started to slow down and break. That's why he broke. Whereas Neves, he knew he would have to pick Neves apart slowly but surely, and that knockout would eventually open itself up, and it did. So with Garry, of course he was going to slow down against Page and Prates grappling as hard and utilizing as much energy as he did against those guys. He's going to come in with a different game plan here against Makhachev to make it a little bit more interesting. Also, the other one other thing that I want to put out there for you guys. Garry has a 5-inch height advantage and a 4-inch reach advantage. We've seen one of the more unbeatable fighters come up a weight class just in June as a big favorite, and his knockout power did not translate. His style did not translate up a weight class against a guy that could actually eat his shot and actually throw back with some heat of their own. I'm talking about Ilya Topuria and Justin Gaethje. Not saying this is somewhat similar because obviously Makhachev much more experienced than Garry, but coming up a division and actually fighting a guy that can provide some resistance in the grappling realm, not like Madalena, right? Garry will actually provide some resistance there. How does that wear on Makhachev's gas tank, who we've seen slow down late in fights from pushing a heavy grappling pace? If he doesn't submit Garry or doesn't get Garry out of there quickly, can he have success in championship rounds? Can he stay safe enough from the striking advantage that Garry has? So these are all just questions and things I want you guys to consider when you're thinking about parlaying Makhachev. I'm saying all this to still predict Makhachev to win. I think Makhachev wins by decision. I think his wrestling is just going to be too good. But for people to be like, Garry has no chance of winning this fight, and even for me to say that I want to see Morales in this spot more than Garry, should not take away from the chances that Garry actually has of pulling off the upset. There are so many factors you have to consider going into this matchup, but I believe ultimately that Dagestani wrestling, that control, the submission threat from the top position is going to be too much for Garry to handle. I think Makhachev ekes out at least 4 of the 5 rounds here and he wins a decision, but I'm not going to be paying this parlay ticket. or sorry, this chalky ticket on a parlay for Makhachev at minus 370. I'm picking Makhachev and still UFC welterweight champion, and I think he wins by decision.